And joining us now on the debate, three people who are facing a most difficult choice in Egypt's election. In Cairo, Egypt, via Skype, Taisir Abul Nasser. And with us here in studio, Mohamed Fadel and Mohamed Fateh. And it's great to have Taisir on the line from Cairo. That's terrific, via Skype. Mohamed, nice to see you again, and nice to meet you for the first time here. The news of the day, everybody, is the Supreme Court's decision rendering dissolved the election that saw an election of the lower house of Parliament, and it has dissolved the House and demanded new elections. And Taisir, why don't you start us off on that? What seems to be, well, I was going to ask you the typical reporter question, what's the reaction in Egypt? But never mind that. What's your reaction? What do you think about it?
I'm actually pretty happy. I'm quite happy that the system allows the court to dissolve the parliament and that people are going to have to respect that decision. I think it was, for many people, expected legally. They knew that the laws were not the right laws. So it's quite reassuring for me that the court is still intact and has the power to actually dissolve the parliament.
Mohamed Fadel, your view?
I think it's a very dangerous decision. I think it puts Egypt at a precipice of wide civil strife. I think among revolutionary activists, they've already decided that the judiciary is part of the ancient regime and has no sympathy for real change. And so it's going to lack deep legitimacy.
Mohamed Fateh?
I think I was expecting that because the military will not toss away their candidate on the presidency. And I want to see that decision based on another decree that the Justice of Minister the day before yesterday has declared, which is giving the power, the legislative and legal power, to arrest civilian people and prosecute them. Mm-hmm. So I think what's happening with the dissolving of one-third, they said one-third now, but it will eventually be dissolving the whole thing. So we will see what will happen now, and this is the stick that will Ahmed Shafiq will use against the Muslim Brotherhood and against the revolutionary.
Let me get Taisir's view on this. I don't know if you saw any of the demonstrations that took place in the street, but there were considerable media reports showing a lot of outraged people about this decision, Taisir. Did you see any of it?
Well, my understanding and what I saw on television here in Tahrir Square, that the traffic was flowing. There were some people there, but it wasn't massive demonstrations. And I actually drove from one end to the city to the other today, passing through the middle town, and things were extremely normal. I think people expected the law to exclude Shafiq, the former prime minister, to be tossed down, because you can't create laws for individuals and you can't apply laws retroactively. The parliament had done a massive mistake by not acting on generating that law the first day they went in. That's their problem, but you can't start custom making laws. And I think if the principle was accepted that in unusual circumstances it is okay to custom make a law, then you can go back to what Mubarak was doing. So from my perspective, from a principle base, even though I personally detest, with all due respect to Mr. Shafiq, I still believe that it was the mistake of the parliament to not create that law. If I could add quickly, instead of having discussed the laws that had to do with women and with marriage and divorce and all kinds of other stupidities that were being discussed, had they done their job and produced that law the day they went in, we wouldn't be in this situation today. But I can't blame the military council for this, and I can't blame the court for that. The court did something that anybody with a little bit of common sense, without even training in law, would tell you. You can't apply laws retroactively.
Okay, let's focus on the events of the weekend. They have a runoff election for president. We've already mentioned Ahmed Shafiq, the former associate of Hosni Mubarak, who's running. There's also Mohamed Mursi from the Muslim Brotherhood who's running. And I want to know, Mohamed Fadel, first from you, there seems to be a lot of angst among many Egyptians about this choice. How come?
Well, I mean, I think they're the two most polarizing candidates that were in the presidential race, and I think that they don't really represent the first choice of about 50% of the Egyptian population. I mean, that was demonstrated in round one of the election. And so instead of creating an election whose winner will represent all of Egyptians, it's going to produce a winner that alienates at least half of society, right? In a very profound way. So I think that's why everybody is quite concerned about this runoff.
Mohamed Fateh, you have a vote. Who are you going to vote for?
None.
You're not going to vote?
No.
How come?
No, it's why, because I can't vote for the Muslim Brotherhood and I can't vote for the old regime. Okay? I think the message on this runoff is from the military is nothing is happening. Okay? You guys did the people did the revolution, but you are facing the same choices that from before. It's either us or the Muslim Brotherhood. They orchestrated that, and with the Muslim Brotherhood dancing on their beat and helping them, that's what the conclusion that we have right now. And I agree with Taysir, because they should have done some laws for isolation, political isolation for all the old regime, the figures on the old regime, and if that happened, Mr. Shafiq would not have been there. But they were busy in something else, lowering the marriage for the girl, the marriage age for the girl, and all that nonsense. It's
you call it nonsense. Obviously, some people were very concerned about that, though.
This is not the concern of the Egyptian people. The Egyptian people, they went for the revolution for three reasons: freedom, dignity, and social justice. Okay, that's what the people want.
Okay, let's see from Taysir. You have a vote. Are you going to vote?
I was definitely going to vote, but I was going to spoil my vote. That was my initial point. I didn't want it to be seen as apathy. I wanted to go and mark it for both, because I agree with both your guests, that both Mohammed's there, that these are the absolute most stable choices for people. And it's not a question of you have a preferred candidate. You actually are completely against one or the other. So initially I was going to spoil my vote, but more and more seeing what is going on, I tended much more not to just hold my nose, but I was seriously considering voting for Shafiq, even though I figured my hand is not going to allow me to mark it in there, because I absolutely on every level disagree with the man, but the Muslim Brotherhood is making it very, very hard for me to allow Mr. Mursi to win either. So it's a horrible bind. It's a horrible bind.
Well, Mohamed Fadl, Brian Mulrooney used to have a line, "Don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative." So you may not like the two options, but one of them's got to be better than the other.
That's right, and that's my position, and that's why I voted for Mursi, unapologetically, because in my opinion, Egypt is in a transition phase, and the most important thing is to do things that take us as far as possible in the circumstances from the ancient regime. In my view, I think the risks that the Muslim Brotherhood pose to a more democratic future in Egypt are quite minimal relative to Shafiq and the restoration of the police state. I mean, people might accuse the Muslim Brotherhood of having a hidden agenda, double talk, et cetera, but Shafiq, we have open talk of killing people in the street, executing people who are against his rule. So to me, the clear choice is somebody who at least isn't threatening the Egyptian people with fire and steel and jail and execution.
But you may get an Islamist regime from him down the road somewhere.
Well, I think that it's a very weak regime. I don't think the Muslim Brotherhood is an irrational actor. I think it knows clearly that its continued support depends on its ability to maintain a certain level of popularity among the Egyptian populace. And I think unlike other actors in the transitional phase, it actually has support throughout the country. From the perspective of political science, I would call it a median actor. So it seems to me capable of running the country in the transitional phase. But it's not going to be too strong, but that's strong enough to help in this transition phase. The worst thing is to go back to the ancient regime, and that's why I voted for Mursi.
So would you try to convince Taysir that she should not spoil her ballot, but rather should vote for Mursi?
I absolutely think that spoiling the ballot is a vote for the ancient regime. And just let me just add one thing. I don't think the ancient regime can reconstitute itself. Even if Shafiq wins, they're not going to be able to return stability to Egypt. But it will raise the risk substantially of Egypt becoming a failed state. That's what I worry about.
What do you make of his choice?
Well, I disagree, because they put us in a choice between military dictatorship and Islamic fascism. This is what we have. And as Einstein said, you can't do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Okay,
That's
the results for the Islamists, okay, for the application of the Islamic regime. We have seen that in Sudan. Sudan now is two parts, and they are fighting each other. We see that in Pakistan, it is a failed state. We see that in Somalia, it is a failed state, okay? And we see that everywhere, okay? So what they say, in one of his speeches, he was speaking, and there's one of the major figures in the Muslim Brotherhood. They were saying, our aim is the Khilafah. That means, get all the Muslims all together, and our capital is not going to be Cairo. It is going to be Jerusalem, and so that means they are lying to the people. You can't do that unless you go to the war with Israel. We are not prepared for any war with anyone, okay? And so that means you are lying to the people when you say that, okay, we respect all our agreements with our. So this is very dangerous, because I think the lesser evil will be Mr. Shafiq.
Well, let me get Taisir back in here on that. All right, you indicated as you took us through your thought process that you were thinking of spoiling your ballot. Now, admittedly, a few days ahead of time, you're thinking about leaning towards Shafiq. Is there anything that Mohamed Fadel said that might make you change your mind and reconsider Mursi?
I actually would have agreed with Mohamed Fadel a couple of months ago. I did, if you remember last time I was on and you asked about the Muslim Brotherhood win, and I said that's perfectly fine with me. I don't have a problem. I'm not worried as a woman. I am now worried because unlike, I wish they were like Mohammed was saying, but they really don't hear the people. And we've seen that when the whole issue about the constitution of the committee to write the constitution came up. They were literally deaf. They did not hear all the objections until the court struck down the committee, and then they started again. And strangely enough, they repeated the exact same thing they did before. They are not hearing what people are saying, and that's what scares me. They're not listening. Shafiq is not listening either, but they have their claim that God is on their side, and that will make it much harder to get them out. I tend to go with the simplistic approach of some people who are saying Shafiq would be an easier person to pressure and to push out than a group that really is dedicated to its own plan, like the other Muhammad was saying, and is not listening. And their popularity has dropped massively in the election, and it didn't shake them. They actually ended up, I was trying to calculate it, if you collect all the vote that went for Mursi and Abul Fatouh and Al-Awa, the three that talked about the political Islam, it was actually around 43% of the total vote in the last election, if I did my numbers right. So they really massively dropped in popularity, and it still did not get them to change their perspective. And again, when they were setting up the committee for the constitution, they did exactly the same thing. And that really, really scared me. They are incapable of hearing what is going on outside.
Having said that, Mohamed Fadel, I want to give you a chance to try to convince your namesake here that he shouldn't stand on the sidelines, but that he should cast a ballot.
Well, it's better to stand on the sidelines than to cast a ballot for Shafiq.
I see. Okay.
So,
you'd rather have him abstain than vote for, quote unquote, the wrong person.
Shafiq, I think, is catastrophic, right? I think the basic difference here, which people don't, I think, from my perspective, people don't understand the difference between transitional politics and ordinary politics. All the criticisms I hear of the Muslim Brotherhood are perfectly fine and to be expected and welcomed in the context of a stable, democratic system where you've got competitive, multi-party elections. But we're not there yet, no. Right? The biggest thing that we have to do is dismantle the security state. We have to establish some kind of stability for the economy. We have to reestablish some kind of fiscal solvency for the state. And the question is, who can actually do that among those of the people that are in front of us, right? That's the real problem.
And do you think that he should, better for him to abstain than to vote for Morsi?
I think so.
I already voted, so it's too late.
It's too late? You already voted in the advance poll?
Yeah.
So
that's the way they did the voting for the Egyptians living abroad. You had a window of opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a done deal now.
It's a done deal. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
For the record, Stephen, I just want to say that
sure.
I fully agree with his concerns about Shafiq. I absolutely don't trust the man. I just think I can pressure him a little bit more than I can with the Muslim Brotherhood.
See, Shafiq has guns, lots of guns. Mm-hmm. Morsi might be a fool, but he doesn't have guns.
It's the claim of power of God that has has been manipulated, and I'm a deeply religious and observant person. But the way they manipulated this part is what scares me to death.
That's a point. I mean, we might not have heard, Taisir, the beginning of what you said because the feed was just messing around a little bit, but you said you can live with guns, but you're not sure you can live with the religious extremism? Is that what I heard?
I'm not calling it religious extremism. Their claim that, and they have done that repeatedly, that voting for them is voting for God. I'm not talking about religious extremism. The fact that they define themselves as the party that represents God, which by definition makes all the others ungodly people. That is a harder thing to argue with a population that has a lot of people who are uneducated and who care deeply about not being perceived as anti-God. Guns, I mean, the argument that I have convinced myself to get myself to swallow considering voting for Shafiq is just like Mubarak. Mubarak had lots of guns and he was pushed out. So if he went out, we can get the other one out. And Shafiq will want to be there for himself, but not a legacy for the future. So pushing him out can be, it's not the best of arguments, but...
Okay, we're going to get some 2 minutes left here. Let's get some feedback in the studio. You first and then you, Mohamed.
I totally agree with Taisir because these guys have guns, the military, but the Muslim Brotherhood, we saw them in the demonstration in Muhammad Street, and they sent their militias, their actual militias, to stop the revolutionary people from going to the parliament. And that's what we are going to get. They have their own militias. And one of them, Mr. Ghazlan, said, democracy is blasphemy. That's very, very square.
So they have guns and God.
Yeah, they will have both at that time. And it will be harder because these guys, they have ideology. The military, on the other hand, they don't have ideology. Their only ideology is to steal money and stay in power.
Last minute, Mohamed Fadl.
Well, I mean, I think what Taisir said about the drop in popularity of the Muslim Brotherhood sort of contradicts her fear that they would be able to say that Egyptians are so naive that they can be deceived by people who claim to represent God. At the end of the day, I want somebody to tell me who can navigate Egypt in this transition stage of the political actors that are on the ground, right? As it turned out, I don't like calling them secular forces because that's a dirty word in Egypt, but the non-Muslim Brotherhood forces have been unable to develop any kind of coherent political party or institution so they could effectively govern during this period, right? I'm saying that if we believe the Muslim Brotherhood is a rational political actor, the force of democracy will force them to adopt policies that are generally acceptable to a large segment of the Egyptian populace, even if they don't want to, right? And that's what we need right now. We need to get to a different place that's stable.
My thanks to the three of you for this look at this most historic election in Egypt. Taisir Abul Nasser, good of you to join us via Skype from Cairo. Good luck with your decision on the weekend. Mohamed Fadl, Mohamed Fateh, thanks so much for being here in studio.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.